behalf of everyone here in Radha Gopinath Temple, we welcome you to our Sunday festival. Yesterday and this morning, we were discussing how Krishna, the Lord, personally and through his intimate associates have taught us to be saragrahi, to seek the essence. The regulative principles of devotional service. Sravana kirtana smarana bandhana pada sevana dasyade pujana saki jana atma nivedana. These 9 processes of bhakti are crucial for bringing us to that essence. But it is that essence we should be seeking in ourselves, in every situation that comes upon us, and in everyone that comes upon us. To see it, to serve it. That essence is that we are eternal servants of Krishna. That every living being is part of Krishna. That the entire cosmic manifestation is Krishna's energy. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. To the degree we awaken our love for Krishna, we can actually see Krishna through his energy everywhere, in everyone. And therefore, in every situation, our meditation is, how could I serve? Janasya mahoya mahamameti. When we are under the illusion of forgetfulness of who we really are, then we think in terms of, I am this body and mind, and whatever I can possibly acquire is mine. My family, my body, my land, my religion, my nationality, my intelligence, my abilities. But according to Srimad Bhagavatam, that is the basis of illusion and suffering. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. When love of Krishna begins to awaken within our hearts, we see everything as Krishna's energy. This microphone, this seat, everybody we see, from the insects to the birds, to the trees, to the mountains and the rocks, to the buildings, the sun, the moon, the sky, every person, whoever they may be. When we see it in relation with Krishna, we simply want to serve with love. That is the liberated platform. We were discussing Pundarik Vidyanidhi, how he appeared like a very materialistic person, very attached to material things. Messages. This will help me not forget. And what was I saying? Pundarik Vidyanidhi, yes. But he was the greatest devotee. So much so that the Lord and all of the greatest of the saints, they honored him as their father, their guru. And on the other hand, we have Putana. Putana appeared in the guise of the most cultured, compassionate, motherly, beautiful goddess of fortune. But in her heart, she was wicked, envious, and cruel. There's a beautiful story in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam of an avatar, a partial expansion of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. His name was Rishabdev. He became the king of the world, and he ruled it with such morality, such efficiency, and most of all, with such compassion of devotion. The greatest compassion is our example in life. Yad yad acharati srestas tad tad evetarojana sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. Krishna tells in Gita that what great people do, common people will naturally follow. Whatever standard they set, the world will pursue. How interesting Rishabdev was. He taught in so many ways. The beginning of his life, the middle, and especially we'll speak something about the last phase of his life. Rishabdev, as the king, he taught everyone the highest example by his own compassion, selfless service to every living being, devotion to God. He was playing the role of a devotee, performing yajna, doing everything properly, and making sure everybody had everything. Everyone had nice clothes, everyone had nice food, everyone had nice medical services, everyone had nice homes, properties, everyone was encouraged, appreciated, and most of all, everyone was enthused and inspired with faith in God to practice the path of devotional service and in this life be liberated once and for all. Therefore, everyone loved him. And when he saw, he had 100 sons, when he saw that they were capable of taking the throne, he instructed them. It was his last instructions. Those instructions, Srila Prabhupada explains, were the perfect, most precise and needful instructions, not only for family people, but for sannyasis, brahmacharis, everyone. He gave instructions of how to live every moment of our life free from the infatuation of materialistic egos and attachments, and developing total attachment to the loving service of the Supreme Lord who is within the heart of every living being. And at the end of these incredible instructions, he told all his sons that I am requesting you to cooperate with your brother Bharat. I am appointing him to be the king. He said, do not have material conceptions. Do not be envious. Serve your brother and assist him in every way in ruling the world. Very important instruction. It was like everything else he told them. Now there was something practical they can do. Rishabdev explained how people get entangled in material bondage, pungsasriya maituni bhavametam, and how to get out of it. Mahatsevam dvara mahurava muktes tamodvaram yoshita sangi sangam. By associating with great saints, mahats, the doors to liberation are open. And by associating with people who are too much addicted and attached to gross and subtle illusory pleasures, who want to be the controller, the enjoyer, the proprietor, then the doors to further bondage are opened for us. How to accept a guru, how to worship the Lord with all your heart. That the ultimate and only true goal of life is pure love for the Lord. And then he gave something practical for them to do, which is going to be a challenge. Be the servant of the servant of the servant. Accept your brother as your superior and assist him in every way. Serve him in every way. Now please understand, these sons of Rishab, they were, every single one of them were extremely qualified. There was the 9 Yogendras, who were powerful renunciates in every way. Some of the most great learned scholars that ever lived on earth. Even Krishna, in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, was quoting their incredible teachings. And some of what the 9 Yogendras spoke are the most important verses in all the Vedas, telling us about the nature of the different incarnations of God, about the Yuga Dharmas, and then his other sons, they were trained to be very, very powerful rulers. But you all serve Bharat. That's a good challenge, isn't it? Because usually if you have some power, you want your own kingdom. You want your own, you compete. But they accept it. Don't be envious. If there's any way to apply the principles of bhakti in a practical way, it's to not be envious. Otherwise, nothing is understood. Krishna told Arjuna, you can understand these teachings because you are not envious. If we're envious, we can precisely pronounce every single syllable of every word of Bhagavad Gita in memory. We could know the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole Bhagavad Gita, the whole Ramayana, the whole Mahabharata, the 4 Vedas, the Itihastas, the Vedanta Sutra, the Mano Samhita, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the Ayurveda Shastras, the Jyotir Shastras, the Vastu Shastras. We could memorize every single one of them, every word, and speak perfect Sanskrit by memory. And know nothing. If we're envious. Because there's Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan is the theoretical information that we store in our minds, in our brains, which is necessary. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojata. Then the next part is knowledge and renunciation automatically take place with their surrender to Vasudeva. It's the roadmap. Knowledge is a roadmap of where we are, where we want to go, and what we have to do to get there. And all of the various detours and obstacles and storms and temptations and fears and attractions and aversions and successes and failures and honors and dishonors, everything that's going to be between where we are and where we want to go. And we must keep focused on that goal. And we must understand how to pass through all these different challenges and phases of life in such a way that we keep moving forward toward the goal. Otherwise, what happens, manusyanam sahasreshu, it's very rare. In fact, Sri Chaitanya and Mahaprabhu, when he was speaking to Rupa Goswami, he talked about how pure devotional service is very rare. Most people most living entities are in the lower species in this universe. It's very rare to get a human life. And when you get a human life, it's very rare to actually follow a real spiritual path, religion. And of those people who actually follow some spiritual path of religion, most people just do it for fruitive, mundane results. And of those who actually are trying to cultivate detachment, most people, they want mystic powers or liberation. It's very rare to find anybody who's actually looking for pure love of God, even in the name of religion. All religions. And of those who actually focus on that pure love of God, it's very rare that one achieves it, because it's so easy to get distracted. That's why we need association, to keep ourselves fixed. So to be the servant of the servant of the servant without envy, the Lord is teaching us. That's a practical way of receiving the mercy of the Lord. It is only the mercy of the Lord, the grace of Krishna, that could carry us through all the dualities, the challenges, and the diversions that are inevitably going to be on our path. Then Rishabdev, right living at home, after coronated Bharat and training all his other sons, he stayed at home, but he became an avadut. He was an avatar. When he was teaching, a very extraordinary example. He just was so immersed, so totally immersed in spiritual revelation. He never thought about whether he should put on clothes or not. He was totally separated from his body internally. So he stopped putting on clothes. He didn't stop putting on clothes. He didn't stop anything. He just didn't do it. It's one thing when you stop something because you want to renounce something, but he forgot about everything. He forgot about clothes. He forgot about eating practically. He forgot about bathing. He just was absorbed. And he lived at home like that with his family. How long can you do that? Then he left home. And he started traveling everywhere. He was just roaming around. No trains, no planes, no rickshaws. He was just walking. He was walking through the cities and walking through the towns and the villages, through the farmlands and the pastures, into the forests, into the deep jungles, and everywhere walking. And it's described that because he was so completely aloof from the bodily platform, he wasn't talking. Years go by, you don't bathe, you don't comb your hair. It described that there were all flies around him. And people thought he was a madman. wherever he went, the general public, they laughed at him, they ridiculed him, they actually started to hate him. They would throw stones at him. Oh, you fool, you madman. Oh, get out of here. We don't want a person like you around. They didn't know that he was they couldn't recognize him. A few years before, he was the king. They worshipped him. They honored him. He provided literally everything for them. You would think they would say, oh, now the king is a great avadut. Everything we have is by his grace. Let us serve him. Let us offer some seva for him. But they didn't recognize. So the very person who was greater than their father, they were throwing stones on. They were spitting on. They were picking up dog stool, cat stool, wolf stool, human stool, and throwing it in his face. If he was laying down, they would just throw urine on him. They treated him like with total disdain and disrespect, ridicule. And Rishabhdev was completely happy. Why was he so happy? Honor, dishonor. He was teaching by example. He was honored as the king of the world, sitting on a throne, and every single person who was satisfied by his rule was coming and worshiping him. And now the same people were absolutely disgracing him. But for him it was all the same. Because he realized that the eternal soul is not affected by any of these things. Srimad Bhagavatam explains how when we come to that self-realized position, just like the full moon reflects on the surface of the ocean, the Arabian Sea you have here in Mumbai. I don't know how many of you go to the sea to see the sea, because it's down the coast near Udupi, it's a beautiful sea, but here it's kind of like Rishabhdev after he became an it's like an Avaduta sea. So nobody bothers, other parts of the sea, you go to Goa and there are people spending large sums of money to go in the sun at the sea, and to bathe in the sea, and to surf in the sea, and to have parties at the sea. But, last I was down there, people were passing stool in the sea. You have seen. You're laughing because you have seen. But when the moon is shining on the surface of the sea, according to the waves, when it's a windy, stormy day, the moon is going. And when it's a very nice, pleasant day, the moon is sitting very peacefully, giving darshan in the reflection of the sea. But actually, the moon's always the same. It's not there's a full moon, and there's a half moon, and there's a quarter moon, and there's a no moon, amavasya. The moon is always full. It's not that the moon is shrinking, it's just our perception of it is changing because of the light that's touching it. So the moon's always the same. But when we look at the moon waxing and waning on the surface of the sea, it's a reflection. So similarly, when we realize the fullness, the Satchit Ananda nature of the Atma, the soul, then whatever storm, whatever reflection is on the sea, whether it's peaceful or stormy, We don't identify with that. We identify with who we really are. So Rishabdev was detached. And actually he was giving people the opportunity to make spiritual advancement by going. Why was he traveling to all the cities and all the villages and all the towns? He was giving them a chance to have his darshan. He was God. But nobody appreciated. So he was thinking, if nobody appreciates, then why should I give? There's no sense. So he went deep into the forest where no humans were. And he became like a python. He would just lay on the ground. He was a pure vegetarian. But if some vegetables fell in his mouth, he would eat. Otherwise, no need. Just whatever God provides. That's how he was living. And he didn't want these people to disturb him anymore, who were just so mundane and so just judging a person by how they look, by how they smell. He didn't want to be judged like that. He didn't want to, it was just a waste. So you know what he did? I'll go a little longer, so what I tell you is not just before prasad. He would lay on the ground, he would pass stool and urine, then he would roll in it. The reason he did that, then nobody would want anything to do with him. Then no materialistic people would bother him. The Lord reciprocates according to how we approach him. And wow, when the Lord wants to reciprocate, he can be so creative and so transcendental. Think about it. I'm not going to repeat what I just said, because I think it's already made an impression in your heart. This was millions of years ago he did that, and we're still talking about it. That's God. Somebody else does it. It's not in the Holy Scriptures. It's not meditated on by the greatest saints in history. And ultimately, he just went into a forest in South India, Karnataka, and there was a fire, and he just allowed himself to go and ended his leelas. And then we have Bharat, his son. All his brothers following their father's holy footsteps and his incredible instructions. They cooperated so nicely. They all worked together. And Rishabdev ruled the world Bharat ruled the world just like Rishabh. He taught everybody how to perfect their lives, how to liberate their souls, while performing their particular occupations, by seeing everything ultimately as the property of God. This is the very special quality of bhakti. Rupa Goswami, he explained that perfect renunciation is not just to give things up. It's to utilize everything in positive, favorable devotional service with love and affection. The material world is Krishna's property that should be used to help the whole world to live in such a way to never take birth again, to gradually evolve to that state. And that's the way Bharat ruled. He provided every opportunity for everyone. And the whole world was so happy with him that they named the world after him, Bharat Varsha. Even to this day, India is called Bharat. Yes? Named after a king from so long ago. The name India, that's another story. But the name Bharat, that name was given to this place because of the spiritual substance of what Bharat represented. He was an ocean of compassion, an ocean of knowledge, an ocean of love. He had 5 children. And when they grew old enough, even though he was the undisputed king of every direction, he understood that I must set the example. He wasn't attached to the facility, he was attached to the service. We can be attached to our service, but if we become attached to the facilities, facility means the name, the fame, the prestige, the proximity, the property, all of these things, if we become attached to the facilities, then we're very incomplete and imperfect. We may be for the time being, but if we don't have the proper evolution of consciousness, the facilities cause bondage. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains, dharmasya hyabhavaragyasya. We should render devotional service and not be detached or distracted from the benefits we get from devotional service. We can get so many things. It's not ours to enjoy. It's for Krishna. So Bharat, can you imagine his palace, the foods he was eating, the clothes he was wearing, the popularity he had everywhere, the family that loved him so much. His wife was like a goddess. And he did it all so well. But at a certain point, as the king, now you're lucky that you're not the king. Because if you're king, people expect you to leave everything at a certain stage. And he did it. He just walked away from everything. With love, he put everything in place so that his whole family was going to get enlightened because he gave them so much. He prepared them so well for what he was going to do. And he went to the Pulaha ashram in the Himalayas. And he found a place on the banks of the river Gandaki. Gandaki, very, very special place. Wherever that river flows, it's very sacred because it is the abode of the Lord. From the Gandaki River, Lord Vishnu incarnates as the Shalagram Shila. So many Shalagram Shilas. They are self-manifested Murtis of Vishnu. They're not stones. They don't have to be installed. You just reach in and there's an installed deity, self-manifested in your hand, ready for full worship. That is Shalagram Shila. And therefore the Gandaki is like the mother of the Lord, because she's given birth to millions of little forms of the Lord. So she's so sacred. And because there are countless Shalagram Shilas within her body, wherever the Gandaki River flows, it's Charanamrit. It's pure. It's the spiritual world. It's Abhishekam, nectar. So that is where he chose to be. Most people worship Shalagram Shila as Vishnu. Srila Prabhupada in particular, he was seeing Krishna everywhere. Because I remember, I think it was about 1976, Srila Prabhupada, he had given a Shalagram Shila to Jananivas Prabhu in Sri Mayapur Dham. But in all of his temples, there was no Shalagram Shilas anywhere outside of India. As far as I know, it was only in Mayapur. So he wanted to establish the worship of Shalagram Shila in the West. So he personally sent 2 Shalagram Shilas to New Vrindavan. One's name was Hiranyagarbha, and the other was Sudarshan Chakra. Or Sudarshan, I'm sorry, just Sudarshan. But he looked like a Sudarshan Chakra. And he dictated instructions of how to worship Shalagram Shila. And I was way up on a mountain, isolated from the whole community, where the few brahmacharis were living. Nityadita Prabhu, is he here now? Is he somewhere? Oh, he's way in the back, my Lord. Would you like to come and sit with us up here? Do you remember? That's a really nice place. There you are. We all have our karma, what to do. Somehow I have to be up here. But he sent these Shalagram Shilas, and he sent a note that was dictated to the person who was bringing the Shalagrams. And I was way up on that hill, and I was supposed to be their pujari. Now this was scary, because in the West, we had so many conceptions and misconceptions and everything else, because Krishna consciousness was so new in the West. And we were all hearing. For a couple of years we heard, I don't know where it came from, that Shalagram Shila worship is so strict that if you commit a single offense, you will either fall down or die. Nothing in between. Do you remember that, Nityadita? You remember that was what we were hearing all the time? So, nobody wanted to worship Shalagram Shila. And then somebody comes from India with 2 Shalagram Shilas saying Prabhupada wants to establish Shalagram Shila in the West. And nobody wanted to do that puja. Especially me. Because if anybody knew how many offenses I committed, it was me. I wouldn't survive a day. I don't know, it's not that bad, because nobody, even the person who was giving it, he didn't really know. He said, it's not that bad. I said, well, how bad is it? He said, well, he said, I think it's almost that bad. But anyways, I was ordered to do it. I tried every way, but okay, I surrendered. And this little note I read, and Srila Prabhupada, he said, you can worship Shalagram, because it's not that you fall down and die, but you do have to avoid making offenses. But sometimes devotees have the tendency to make things really extreme. So the note, Prabhupada said, begin very simple. He said, bathe him with water scented with rose water. Give him bath every day. And then dry him. And then you can put chandan on his feet and tulsi leaves. Srila Prabhupada said, first-class shalagram worship means tulsi leaves. Just bathe him, put some chandan, and tulsi leaves. That's all. And then he said, and you can also paint a face on him. You can give him a dhoti, a chadar, a crown, and a flute. Now, I never saw Vishnu playing a flute. And everyone was telling me he was Vishnu. So I understood Prabhupada was seeing Krishna in Vishnu. Because Krishna and Vishnu are one, and he reciprocates according to how we approach him. So Prabhupada was seeing Shalagram Srila as Krishna. So we had a little flute made for him, and a little chadar and dhoti. And as far as putting tulsi leaves on his feet, it's very special to try to understand Shalagram's feet. But we understand his feet are everywhere. You could put him anywhere. Depending on which way you put him on his little throne, his altar. But it's very beautiful. It's very sweet. And then he wrote one more thing. He said, if you want more information, you should write to Jananivas in Mayapur. So I was putting water and chandan and tulsi leaves, and then I was drawing a face. Then I offered a crown, a dhoti, a chadar, and a flute. So that was nice. So Prabhupada directed, if you want to offer more seva, you should write to Jananivas. I wrote to Jananivas, and he told me that I should follow all the 64 items that Lord Chaitanya explained to Sanatana Goswami in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I started doing that, and every morning the puja lasted 2.5 hours. Just drawing little signs and everything like that. And then this book came out, the Archana Padhati, and Jananivas said, now I'm doing this. And I was thinking, what happened is, I added everything of the 64 items to Chaitanya Charitamrita. I added, in addition to that, the whole Archana Padhati. What I didn't understand is he did one instead of the other. But I just did both, so now it was taking about 3 hours a day. Just for the morning seva. He's this big, 3 hours. It's really very transcendental. Remember? So Bharat Maharaj was sitting on bank of Gandaki River. He had his little shalagrams, worshipped the Lord. And how did he worship the Lord? Yesterday was Pushyabhishek. We quoted the verse, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yo Me Bhakta Prayachchati. Offer me a fruit, a leaf, a flower, or a little water with devotion, and I will accept it. So Bharat Maharaj, previously, he was the emperor of the planet. Can you imagine the puja he was doing? He was worshiping the Lord, gold and silver plates, and what jewelry of diamonds, emeralds, and rubies, and sapphires, and he had wonderful temples, wonderful singhasans. He was offering the best of everything he had to the Lord. And in the Gandaki, that same king, with the same devotion, in fact, even more, he would just collect some wild flowers, collect some tulsi leaves, collect some wild fruits perhaps, and the water of the Gandaki River. That's all.